Well, I'll give him another 20 minutes. But that's it.
You heard the man. We have 20 minutes to do this. Airplane is a 1980 movie which is always ranked at or near the top of any funniest movies ever list. Many YouTubers have reacted to it, but obviously don't understand all the jokes, simply because they're just too young to be aware of the references. Now, this video is an attempt to correct that lack of knowledge, and maybe make a few other comments along the way. First, though, we need some context and background. Most people think Airplane is a parody of the series of airport disaster movies from the 70s. Well, it sort of is, but it's more a happenstance than an intention. Mainly a remake slash parody of 1957's 0 Hour, complete with the exclamation point. It's almost shot for shot identical. So much so, in fact, that the executive producers slash directors slash writers, which are the same three people, actually bought the rights to the older film to eliminate any legal issues. Since both films were released by Paramount, that likely wouldn't have been that much of a problem. There are a number of videos comparing the two movies. It's really amazing. There's a couple of them up top here. There is, however, a direct relationship with the airport movies. 0 Hour was originally a Canadian television play called Flight into Danger in 1956, with James Doohan, yes, Commander Montgomery Scott, aka Scotty, in the Ted Stryker character, then called George Spencer. A novelization was published in 1958. The original and the novel were co-written by Arthur Haley, who went on to write, wait for it, the novel and movie Airport. So, in effect, both movies were written by the same person. There are a lot of these It's a Small World connections around this movie. Although Airplane is from 1980, many references, in one way or another, go back to the 60s or even the 40s and 50s. Even some of the casting falls into this category. Lloyd Bridges, Robert Stack, Peter Graves, and yes, even Leslie Nielsen were all well-established dramatic actors long before this movie. Having these men play somewhat silly characters, even though they played them totally straight, is in itself ludicrous. There's a lot of geographic and chronological incoherency. Obviously, the main action takes place in present day, 1980, but all references to Stryker's war experience strongly suggest World War II. Stryker wasn't even alive. Well, at least Robert Hayes wasn't. But he said he was in the Air Force, which didn't actually exist as an entity until 1947. Before that, it was the Army Air Corps and then the Army Air Forces. Maybe, just maybe, they were referring to Korea, but that was never referred to just as the war. The Peace Corps began in 1961, so that African sequence really doesn't fit either. That's a nice thing about these Zaz, Zucker movies. Time and place mean nothing if they lead to a good joke. Check out Top Secret. Enough background, now for the foreground. Okay, everyone knows this is Jaws.
We'd like you to have this flower from the Religious Consciousness Church. Would you care to make a donation?
No, but thank you anyway.
The younger generation might not realize that before 9/11, you could indeed freely wander about airport terminals. And since there are so many people milling about, these were a favorite hunting ground for the Krishna types and other religious and political activists. Times have changed. Now it's just the government and the airlines that make air travel so miserable. Note the only credit is written for the screen. Nothing about based on or story by or any of that kind of stuff that's normally shown on movies like this.
Any word on that storm lifting over Salt Lake, Clarence?
No, not likely, Victor. I just reviewed the area report for 1,600 hours through 2,400. It's an occluded front stalled over the Dakotas, backed up all the way to...
Pilots are indeed required to keep informed about weather conditions, but these guys have an obsession which is far beyond
the
what's
terminal
reasonable.
forecast and winds aloft. High-end far ceilings all the way.
Where do they top out?
Well, there's some light scattered cover at 20,000, icing around 15.
Looks like the original flat over doing the storm pass back.
Now, the gas station attendant checking the oil is Jimmy J.J. Walker, featured on the 1974 through 79 CBS sitcom Good Times. His overused catchphrase is as grating as you'd expect.
Hello, lucky person. You got the number right, because you are talking to Kid a Dynamite! Dynamite! Pure dynamite! Dynamite!
Now let's start with our first leading man, Peter Graves. Now, besides his most famous role as Jim Phelps in the real Mission Impossible from 1966 to 1973 on CBS, he had a long career in film and television, including a number of MST-3000-worthy science fiction movies. My favorite is 1957's The Beginning of the End, about giant grasshoppers that overrun Chicago.
We interrupt this program for an important announcement. The giant locusts have reached the Chicago South Side and nearby suburbs. I repeat, the giant locusts have reached the Chicago South Side and nearby suburbs. Keep calm. Take shelter in basement. Take shelter in basement. Do not.
I'd like one ticket to Chicago. No baggage.
Smoking or non-smoking?
Smoking, please.
There.
Yes, smoking was allowed on airplanes back then. The current ban was phased in between 1988 and 1990, depending on the length of the flight. Now, I can't verify it, but the trivia page at IMDb says these guys made up their own jive based on what they were supposed to be saying, because Zaz had no grasp of it.
Knock yourself a pro slick. The gray matter back, lot performers down, not take TCB in, man.
Hey, you know what they say? See a broad to get that booty yak 'em? Leg her down or smack 'em, yak 'em. Cold got to be. You know? Shit.
God, Bill, I'm gonna miss you so much.
Oh, I'm gonna miss you too. promise you'll write?
Every day.
A spoof of countless B movies of the 40s and 50s. A young man going off to war on a train. There's even a steam engine huffing and puffing in the background.
Bye, Bill.
Goodbye, darling. I love you, darling.
209er, taxi to runway 19er.
Goodbye, darling.
Have your picture taken the minute you get there.
It's worse than Detroit. The mood in the place was downright ugly. You wouldn't walk in there unless you knew
More
how to use your
tropes
fists.
from countless
You
B
count on a
movies.
fight breaking out
The
almost
seedy
every
waterfront
night.
bar, the old West-style bar fight over card game cheating. But I wonder, why was an Air Force, or Army Air Corps, depending on what time frame you want, pilot wearing the uniform of a Navy lieutenant, and not even an aviator? They got the Saturday Night Fever vibe down pretty good. From Here to Eternity, from Columbia Pictures in 1953, starring Burt Lancaster and featuring Deborah Carr. Sorry, but the original doesn't work out as happily here.
Wait a minute. I know you. You're Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You play basketball for the Los Angeles Lakers.
I'm sorry, son, but you must have me confused with someone else. My name is Roger Murdoch. I'm the co-pilot.
You are Kareem. I've seen you play. My dad's got season tickets.
I think you should go back to your seat now, Joey. Right, Clarence?
Kareem continues a tradition. The pilot, not co-pilot, in 0 Hour was played by Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch, famous football player with the Los Angeles Rams from 1949 to 1957. He was elected to the Hall of Fame in 1967.
I got a telegram from headquarters today.
Headquarters? What is it?
Well, it's a big building where generals meet, but that's not important right now. They've cleared you of any blame for what happened on that raid. Isn't that good news?
Is it? Because of my mistake, 6 men didn't return from that raid.
7, Lieutenant Zip died this morning. But Dr. Sandler says she'll be out in a week. Isn't that wonderful?
Wish I could say the same for George Zip.
Remember the name George Zip. It'll mean something later.
What's his problem?
It's Lieutenant Hurwitz. Severe shell shock. Thinks he's Ethel Merman.
You'll be swell.
War is hell.
And that really is Ethel Merman, actress and singer, known for her distinctive, powerful voice, and for leading roles in some of the most popular Broadway shows of the 30s and 40s, even into the 50s. In later life, her appearances were often caricatures of her earlier days.
Jim never has a second cup of coffee at home.
Now, there was a series of commercials for U-Bahn coffee in the 70s with the premise that, quote, Jim never has a second cup of coffee at home, unquote, featuring, believe it or not, the same actress.
Sure you can't stay for more coffee?
It's late, and Jim never has a second cup.
You know, I'd love another cup.
Jim never had seconds of my coffee. And I make pretty good coffee.
Excuse me, sister.
Yes?
There's a little girl on board up front who's ill, and...
Oh, yes, I saw. Poor child.
Could I borrow your guitar? I thought maybe I could cheer her up.
Oh, of course.
Thank you.
The nun is played by Maureen McGovern, who is mainly known as a singer, though she did have a few film roles. This is a nudge at Helen Reddy, who played a singing nun in Airport, but Universal threatened to sue if she took the role in this movie. McGovern's biggest hit was probably The Morning After, featured in the 1972 film The Poseidon Adventure, about a cruise ship that capsizes. The captain of the ship was played by Leslie Nielsen.
Hi.
Told you there were a lot of
Do you mind
It's a
if I
Small
talk to your
World
daughter?
moments.
I think that'd be nice.
And here's another one. Now pay attention. Joyce Bulifant, the mother, had a recurring role on the Mary Tyler Moore Show from 1970 to 1977 on CBS as the wife of newswriter Murray Slaughter, played by Gavin MacLeod. Jill Whelan, the sick girl, went on to Love Boat 1977 to 1986 on ABC as the daughter of Captain Stubing. 1B should be Stubing. I don't know. Never watched it. Played by, guess who? Gavin MacLeod. Our next leading man is Leslie Nielsen. He didn't get started until the early 50s, but once he got going, he certainly held his own with these other guys. Highlights as a dramatic lead, including arguably the greatest pre-Star Wars science fiction movie, Forbidden Planet, not forgetting the aforementioned Poseidon Adventure.
United Planets Cruiser C-57D, J.J. Adams commanding. Who are you?
Morbius of the Bellerophon.
Oh, Dr. Morbius, my orders are to survey the situation on Altair 4.
Commander, if you set down on this planet, I warn you that I cannot be answerable for the safety of your ship or your crew.
Anne Francis is his alluring daughter, Olta, who has never seen a young man till she meets Commander Adams, played by talented Leslie Nielsen.
Come on in.
Didn't bring my bathing suit.
What's a bathing suit?
Oh, murder.
Oh, I should have had that second cup of coffee.
Jim never vomits at home.
I'm sorry.
Now this is a staple of not particularly good stage magicians everywhere. There don't seem to be many of them around anymore, so I guess not knowing this shtick is understandable. In case you haven't figured it out, the woman has the same egg in her mouth all the time. Rumack palms another one each time he lifts his hand up to her mouth. It's really easy to spot from the awkward way he holds his hand. And then pokes his finger through a thin covering on the cup to release the bird.
I'll be back in a minute.
Hold all takeoffs. I don't want another plane in the air. When the 508 reports, bring it straight in.
Yes, sir.
Put out a general bulletin to suspend all meal service on flights out of Los Angeles. Tell all dispatchers to remain at the post. It's going to be a long night. How about some coffee, Johnny?
No thanks.
I want the weather on every landing field this side of the Rockies, no matter what the size. You understand? Any place where there's a chance to land that plane. Get me Rex Kramer.
Okay, Lloyd Bridges, known today for being the father of Jeff and Bo, and for this handful of Zaz parody movies. But if I were to recite his list of credits, it would be here all day. Literally a 7-decade career in television and film. My generation remembers him mainly from tons of cheap westerns and the sci-fi pseudo-classic Rocket Ship XM. But most of all, Sea Hunt, a syndicated TV show from 1958 to 1961.
Just unbelievable. How many times I've warned those people about food inspection?
You'd think after all these years someone would listen to you.
Oh, well, airport management, the FAA, and the airlines. Oh, cheats and liars. All right, let's get out of here.
But that mirror gag is priceless. Which brings us to Robert Stack, probably most famous as Elliot Ness in The Untouchables on ABC from 1959, when Kevin Costner was only 4 years old.
Tonight's episode, One-Armed Bandits, starring Robert Stack as Elliot Ness, co-starring...
To 1963, and better known to younger audiences as the host of Unsolved Mysteries from 1988 to 1997 on NBC. He appeared as a pilot in Fighter Squadron, 1948 from Warner Brothers. Actually, he played pilots in about a half dozen films. But where he really earned his wings, so to speak, was The High and the Mighty, starring John Wayne in 1954, where he played, if you're ready for this, the pilot of a doomed airliner. Described as, quote, the pilot whose nerves of steel were turning to rust. He verges on a breakdown, only to be pulled back by Wayne as the, quote, washed-up co-pilot, who was battling his own demons from a crash he was involved in. Spoiler alert, they join forces and save the day.
All right, I'm going to level with you all. Most important thing now is that you remain calm. There's no reason to panic. Now it is.
I'm sure everybody knows the story of Pinocchio.
Slightly ill. But the other two pilots are just fine. They're at the controls flying the plane, free to pursue a life of religious fulfillment.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Cuddy say can't hang.
Oh, stewardess, I speak jive.
Oh, good.
He said that he's in great pain and he wants to know if you can help him.
All right, would you tell him to just relax and I'll be back as soon as I can with some medicine?
Just hang loose, blood. She's gonna catch up on the rebound on the med side.
What it is, Big Mama? My mama raised no dummies. I duck her rap.
Cut me some slack, Jim.
Barbara Billingsley of Leave It to Beaver on CBS in 1957 and ABC from 58 to 63. Probably the whitest, most upper-middle-class family ever on television. Another inspired, against-type casting decision.
Starring Barbara Billingsley, Hugh Beaumont, Tony Dow, and Jerry Mathers as the Beaver.
Gunnerson, check the radar range. Anything yet?
It's about 2 more minutes, Chief.
Amana's radar range, introduced in 1967, was the first compact microwave oven made for home use. Now here's where George Zip becomes important. The name's a parody of George Gipp, college football player at the University of Notre Dame from 1917 to 1920, under head coach Knute Rockne. Gipp was selected as Notre Dame's first Walter Camp All-American, played several positions, halfback, quarterback, and punter. Gipp died at age 25 of a streptococcal throat infection and pneumonia, 3 weeks after a victory over Northwestern in his senior season.
George Zip said that?
The last thing he said to me, Doc, he said, sometime the crew is up against it. The brakes are beating the boys. Tell them to get out there and give it all they've got. And win just one for
zipper.
I don't know where I'll be then, Doc, he said. But I won't smell too good, that's for sure.
This was recapped in the movie Knute Rockne All-American from Warner Brothers in 1940, starring Pat O'Brien.
Rock, someday when the team's up against it, breaks are beating the boys, ask them to go in there with all they've got. Win just one for the Kipper. I don't know where I'll be then, but I'll know about it. I'll be happy.
And yes, Gip was played by the incredibly young Ronald Reagan, who used the Gipper as a nickname throughout his later public life. Rockne then used the story of Gip, along with his deathbed line that he attributed to Gip, to rally his team to a 12-6 upset of the previously undefeated Army team in 1928. Now the tune is the Notre Dame Victory March. You should always stay and read the credits, especially for a comic, and especially for these nuts. If you did, you would now know that Mike Finnell was, quote, generally in charge of a lot of things, unquote. And Charles Dickens was the author of A Tale of Two Cities.
Well, I'll give him another 20 minutes. But that's it.
Howard Jarvis was an American businessman, lobbyist, and politician. He was a tax policy activist responsible for passage of California's Proposition 13 in 1978, severely restricting property tax increases.